Just get into it today. Yeah, there's a calm before the storm, but that period's already passed. You're listening to Green Wave Radio Live. I'm Christopher Green, your host. It's Tuesday, October 25th, 2011. You know what? We're not going to beat around the bush today. We're just going to get real hardcore truth in your face, whether you like it or not. You know, this is what alternative media television's all about. This is what Green Wave TV is all about. You know, I'm reading over a couple articles here. I'm looking at Europe, says grimmer by the minute. I'm looking at the video I shot, America burns to the ground, Occupy Wall Street violence, the next inevitability, in my opinion, that's coming to these protests and to these protesters, whether we want to acknowledge this fact or not, whether or not we want to pretend that this is just some kind of, you know, utopic environment and that we're all just going to dance around and hold hands and sing Kumbaya at the end of the day. And I'm sorry, guys, that's just not the way it's going to work. That's not what's going to happen. That's not what the conclusion or end result is going to be of Occupy Wall Street. I wish it was. I wish we could have that utopia. I wish we really could hold hands around a campfire and everything could just be okay. And that, you know, we didn't have to live on a place that sometimes looks like hell on earth. You know, I'm reading another article from one of my favorite writers, commentators, Paul B. Farrell out of San Luis Obispo, California. His article title is An Apocalyptic End to World's Biggest Bubble. Commentary, Denial Addictions Feed Inability to Deal with the Population. Okay, it's talking all about population growth. It's talking about how we're going to 7 billion people this month. It's also talking about the fact that we're going by 2050 to 10 billion people. 10 billion. That's unsustainable. There's not enough natural resources, water, food, supplies to support 10 billion people on the planet. This is where we're headed. This is the hardcore reality of where we are today that nobody's talking about. As people are too consumed watching MTV, Beavis and Butthead, and I realize some of these shows are entertaining. I notice people were dropping that in the chat. Of course, we all like to laugh, and we need an escape. A lot of the times we need an escape. That's why during the 1930s, entertainment in Hollywood was so popular. It was one of the thriving industries during the Great Depression when people were suffering and going hungry and people were dying is because people want to escape. That's why people drink. You know, why do you think people drink alcohol or do drugs? It's to escape reality. And the reality isn't pretty. And I know I'm playing the devil's advocate a little bit today, but I want us all to realize where we are headed with these protests. I realize there's a lot of good people out there, and there's a lot of good motives behind it, and it's very much an organic movement from people all across the world that are angry, that have been screwed over by the powers that be, that have been screwed over by the bankers and the politicians and this top 0.001%. But I want us to get real here for a moment. I want us to do some critical thinking. Because for all of you out there saying that this is the, you know, second 1776 style American Revolution, I would say you're wrong. In fact, I would say you're dead wrong. Now, it could go that direction. That might be a possibility, but I'll tell you what a real 1776 Second American Revolution looks like. It looks exactly like the brutal video that we saw, the murder and, you know, the shooting in the head of Muammar Gaddafi like we saw last week, the guy getting the crap beat out of him, bloodied, begging for his life, begging for mercy, and then you got a bunch of freaks basically saying, Allah Akbar, I can't even say it correctly. You know, praise God, praise God, praise God, putting 2 bullets in his legs and then putting a bullet in his head and then displaying his body around like a bunch of savages. Is that what you want? That's what the second 1776 style American Revolution would look like if that's what we get, if that's what you think the turnout's going to be. And I'll tell you, if I was the power that be right now, I was these criminals. Think like a criminal for a moment, I'd be trying to squash this movement as soon as possible. They've already got what they want out of this. They've already positioned a bomb of the puppet to drive us and accelerate World War III, in my opinion. They've already socialized America. As I posted a video weeks ago, the socialists have already won. Congratulations. Mission accomplished. Okay, that was his use. That was the reason Obama was elected and put in the position of power. We do not elect the president. And that was the point I was trying to make with a video I put out prior to this one announcing today's radio show with my suggestion that I think, in my humble opinion, Mitt Romney is more than likely the next president of the United States. Look, your vote doesn't count. I'm sorry, maybe some of our guests today will argue with me on this point. I'd be open to hear that argument. But in my opinion, your vote doesn't matter. If it mattered, people like Ron Paul would get elected, but that's probably not going to happen. They're going to position another conservative, and I think it's probably along the lines of Mitt Romney. Now, there's a host of people that would disagree with me out there, a lot of credible people that would disagree with me, people like Gerald Celente that have insinuated, and they say Obama's going to get reelected. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't see it happening. I don't think we're going that direction. Here we are today, Tuesday, October 25th, 2011. Europe is on fire. America is on fire. They have had to literally create bailout funds, leveraged institutions such as the EFSF. Think about this for a minute. We've actually created vehicles now, investment vehicles, for the sole intent and purpose of bailing out countries and debt. That's how bad things are. It's not just central banks now bailing out and recapitalizing financial institutions and, backstopping European and American sovereign debt. We literally have new vehicles. The European Financial Stability Facility. I've heard all kinds of acronyms. They're talking about some kind of European financial mechanism to buffer that. It's a joke. Trillions and trillions of dollars worth of bailouts. Here we come. A sad, sad, apocalyptic story. It's all going to crash. The cards are coming down. I don't care any way you slice it, any way you dice it. So I want to get into Occupy Wall Street for a moment. And believe me, I'm not taking anything away from the hardworking, honest people out there doing the right thing. And believe me, I've been involved. I haven't posted on video because I'll tell you what, I didn't want to post it on video. There's a lot of people capturing it on film. I think it's great. I've decided not to, at least here in the interim. But I've been down to Occupy Phoenix. I've talked with tons of people down there, dozens of people. I've held the flag. I've held signs up. I've let my voice be heard. Okay, I've met a lot of interesting people, a lot of good-willed people there with good intentions, a lot of smart people, a lot of highly educated people, college students, sitting hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt, can't find a job. I've spoken to baby boomers. I've spoken to grandmothers and grandparents, all kinds of people. I've spoken to homeless people. I've spoken to drug addicts down on the streets. This isn't just one group of people. It's a stratified movement. It's global. But we need to do some critical thinking because I'm telling you, the powers that be want to squash this movement as soon as possible. And the way that they are going to do that is they are going to use violence to their advantage. They are either going to plant or create organically another Jared Loughner style, God forbid, event, Tucson shooting, Gabriel Gifford style, bunch of people are going to get killed. Or we're going to have a smart bomb dropped in one of these American cities. It's going to be an act of terrorism. Something's going to happen. And it's going to give them every reason and every right to slam down the American police state in 2012 down your friggin' throat, America. And they're going to tell you you got exactly what you deserve. And not only that, it's going to scare the crap out of a lot of good, willed people protesting now. They're not going to want to be in that kind of situation. They're not going to want to put themselves or their family at risk. It's the equivalent of being in a foxhole. We never know how we're going to react when the bullets are suddenly coming at you. People can talk the talk, but very few walk the walk. And I'm telling you right now, if what you want is a 1776 style Second American Revolution, everyone's afraid to say it. I don't really give a crap. I'm going to say it. This is what alternative media is. It's hardcore. We are truth seekers. This is about truth. Expect it to get bloody. Expect it to be violent. And in addition to that, we would need the military to back any kind of real movement. Otherwise, this is just a charade. This is just a Hollywood program. It's the real world, baby. Real world San Diego, but instead it's real world New York City. Case in point, they're holding casting calls right now. In fact, maybe some of our listeners, you guys would like to apply. Those of you occupying your local city. Get yourself on MTV, baby. Make a buck off the movement. Case in point, another case in point is the Long Island couple that has commercialized the movement, Occupy Wall Street. I commend them on their business savvy and their business sense. But I'll tell you this, just like our guest said, Michael Cross, who came on the program a couple shows ago, and he enlightened our audience, once things get commercialized, like they do, like we're seeing with Occupy Wall Street, it's over. Done. So I'm playing devil's advocate today. I realize a lot of you are probably going to disagree with what I'm saying today, but I think it's truth. And we're here to uncover truth. I've got a great show planned. We've got Fabian for Liberty coming on in just a few moments. We'll get his take on the growing movement with Occupy Wall Street, what's happening in the capital markets, the breakdown, the ongoing breakup and collapse of the Eurozone. Again, we can't make this stuff up, guys. And then we're also going to bring on the second hour, Tom Mullen will be making his debut. He's an author, activist, musician. Excited to have him on the program. We'll get his take as well. Fabian for Liberty, are you there, my friend?
I am, Christopher. Thanks for having me on the program.
Thank you so much for coming on. You know, I realize that this is a little bit of a grim intro today, but I want to start digging at some real truth of what's going on, and I realize that this is probably open for debate, and there could be some disagreement. And before we get into that, I do want to say I really have been enjoying your content lately. I know you've tried a new format. I tuned into that. I know a lot of our viewers have, and if you haven't already, make sure to check out Fabian at Fabian for Liberty on YouTube. You can also check him out at internetanchorman.tv. Fabian, what's your take on this? Am I beating around the bush? You know, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Where's all this headed?
Well, I'll first say the interesting thing is that the reason alternative media is growing and is becoming so popular is because it's really the final frontier of truth in America. The majority of Americans are just so disillusioned with mainstream media. You know, I don't know about you, Christopher, but I would assume we're in the same boat here. I can't even watch Fox News, CNN, MSN. I can't even watch it because it's such a load of crap, and they're just lying to the people. It's just a bold-faced lie to everybody who's tuning in, just a cattle call of the sheeple going to slaughter is what that is, really. And so, no, I can't tolerate that whatsoever. Alternative media is emerging as a real truth movement, and sometimes it's grim. You know, sometimes it breaks the paradigm of right and left. Sometimes it, calls out sacred cows that people, thought were never going to be called out on, like the military-industrial complex or whatever it may be. And so I think it's one of the ways, a lot of people on YouTube, a lot of people out there think there's no turning the ship. This is, America's over with. I disagree with that. That's why I'm doing my commentary. I have a vested interest in the future of this country because I have 2 little children. I want to grow up in some semblance of liberty and freedom. So, yes, this country is worth fighting for. Alternative media is the way, I believe, to continue that push forward. But we have a real painstaking, tough road ahead.
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head there and I would agree with you. I mean, this country's worth fighting for, absolutely. But maybe there's some disagreement around the fact I do think that we've hit the point of no return in regards to the structural collapse that we have here in the United States. Maybe you'd agree with me there.
I do.
But I just think that we need to understand, as you pointed out, with a lot of clarity, this is not an easy road ahead of us. And that's what I'm trying to make out to our audience. And quite honestly, I'm just worried. I'm worried that of the direction that the country is headed. I'm worried about what is about to explode on the scene. I'm worried about the Occupy Wall Street protests. I don't want to see someone get hurt. I don't want to see people get killed. I don't want to see the American police state come down in full force as a result because they're looking for a reason to come in and quell these protests.
That's right. I mean, listen, Christopher, they're bringing home 40,000 troops from Iraq. For what reason? Well, I mean, some would say, well, they're ending the war and Obama's fulfilling his campaign pledge. I don't really think that because he's doubled down on multiple other war fronts around the world, so he's definitely not the man of peace that we've been sold. So I do believe that the system, as far as the economic system, is over and it will need to be reset. The question is, what do we look like after that reset? I want it to look like a constitutional republic. The ignorance factor in this whole entire equation is it's going to be extremely difficult to overcome. Like in all revolutions, and we are headed towards global revolution. We're not headed towards. We're here in it, living in it right now. It's global revolution, global economic collapse, and global war, the 3 points I've been talking about for some time. Global revolution is what we're living in all, like any revolution. There needs to be a massive amount of the sheeple that are ignorant called the useful idiots, those people are all over the Occupy Wall Street movement. I think you summarized it very good. There's a large segment that are intelligent, that are bright, that understand that the real satanic, demonic, evil entity behind all of this is the private Federal Reserve, is Ben Bernanke, is the criminal culture in Washington, D.C., the lobbyists, the money in the system, the military-industrial complex, all of that. People get that. Many of them do. But many others think we're living in capitalism, which we're really not. It's more like a corporate fascist system. But they believe it's capitalism that's bad and we need to redistribute the wealth. And what is so almost ironic is they want to actually hand someone like Obama, which 50% in some recent polls want to re-elect Obama, they actually think he should have more power, Christopher, more power to centrally plan this economy, more power to, print more money. And so it's absolute insanity. And so the ignorance factor in collusion, if you will, with the useful idiots is what I think is the scariest thing. The entitlement slaves, when they stop getting paid, they're going to go out in the streets and they're going to get violent. It's just an absolute fact if you look back at history, and it's just repeating itself.
Well, you bring up a lot of excellent points, and talking about restoring the republic, maybe we can dig a little deeper into that. How do we do that? And is it realistic that we can restore the republic and we can bring back our constitutional civil rights and our liberties and restore things like we both talk about on a continuous basis, freedom and liberty? Can we do that without shedding blood? Is that realistic when we've got a lot of people, like you just said yourself, that are just droned out, sucking down the propaganda medication on a daily basis? Doesn't this thing need leadership? They keep talking about this Occupy Wall Street being a decentralized movement, which I think is a great strategy in getting the movement started. But where is the leadership? And I'm sorry, it scares the crap out of me not having any kind of real leadership, morally good, with the people's self-interest in mind, taking control of the situation. I think, and I argue, that we need leadership of some kind. I want your take on this. When we come back from the break, I'm here with Fabian for Liberty. We'll also be taking calls from our viewers. We'll be back in just a few.
There must be some kind of way out of here.
Back from the break. This is Greenwave Radio Live. I'm here with Fabian for Liberty. And for a moment, I want you to put yourself in the place of one of the protesters. And maybe you've been protesting yourself in your local city or town. And I want you to imagine yourself in New York City, or maybe you're somewhere else. Maybe you're in Denver. Maybe you're even here in Phoenix. And, you're holding up your sign and, we're the 99%, and we're coming after you bankers and, criminal kleptocrats. And, there's guitars in the background and tents set up, and there's donations of food and water, and everyone just kind of singing Kumbaya in the background. There's no centralized leader to it, just a decentralized movement. And people just want a lot of free items, free health care, free education, etc. And this all sounds great until a bomb goes off and a shrieking boom hits. And you can't hear anything. There's a buzzing. You're knocked and rocked down to the ground. Smoke starts to clear. You don't know if you're dead or alive. You don't know if you're at the pearly gates or not. And, by the time you kind of recollect yourself and kind of dust yourself off, you look around you and it's just pure horror. People dead, hundreds of people, body parts strewn across the landscape. The tents and everybody singing set up, that's all gone. There's just chaos, screaming, people screaming bloody murder. And you wake up to that. Now, I realize that's pretty grim, but that's one possibility of where this thing could be headed. Now, I pray and hope that's not the case, but let me ask you a really valid question. Let's say that happens with Occupy Wall Street. How many of you are out there still, holding up your signs? Probably some of you, but I bet a lot of you go home at that point. And the only reason I'm talking about this, the only reason I'm digging into something as grim as what I just described, is because I want to play devil's advocate here for a minute. I want to play out some really grim, hardcore scenarios that could be playing out in the minds of these psychopaths right now, these criminal elites that are very much still in control. Don't think for a minute these people aren't in control. They're in complete control of the situation. If they want to quell this movement and stop it tomorrow, they will. just like the Obama administration funded and has funded all of these revolutions in the Middle East and have directly propagated the murder of people such as Muammar Gaddafi. If they want to kill you, they will. If they want to put an end to Occupy Wall Street, believe me, they will. I'm not saying the 99% can't take over the top 0.01%. We can, but expect there to be blood. That's the hardcore truth. This isn't a rose-colored glasses situation, in my opinion. This is not, again, a utopia at the end of the rainbow. So, Fabian, I want your take on this. I believe this is, I see that this is getting pretty grim, but we were talking about leadership before we went to the break. Is it possible that we could have a restoring of the republic? Could we really restore liberty and freedom? Maybe I'm wrong, without a leader. Can we?
Well, let me say that we're going to be posting episode 2 of the new format that I've been doing, 30-minute opinion show, later today. And the first 10 minutes is me talking about this very subject. So you can call it leadership, Christopher. I think there is actually leadership in Occupy Wall Street. It's interesting. I think that you have, the different unions. You have individuals like Van Jones, even people like Cass Sunstein. You have the Working Families Party. You have there's, I think, leadership. Tides Foundation, George Soros funneling money through the Tides Foundation to Adbusters. So I think there is a leadership. I do believe that many of the people there, though, at least half of them, they're not aware of any leadership. They think it's a decentralized type movement, but there's always people that run these things. It's kind of like in Egypt. They told us, all of a sudden, 1 million people showed up in Tahrir Square, and then we find out that no, actually it wasn't the case. The State Department was training some of the revolutionaries into community organizing, just like in Occupy Wall Street. We have, now it's admitted they brought over the guy in Egypt to help the Occupy Wall Street movement. So there's a lot more to this, like the Tea Party, which, we had Freedom Works when it comes to the Tea Party, which is, a Republican operation, if you will, backed by the former Speaker of the House, Dick Armey. So these movements, the most dangerous thing to these elitists, to this criminal class that runs our country, that has hijacked our country, is any real third party or people's movement rising up. And as soon as it does, they're either co-opting it within months, in some cases within weeks. I think that's what's happened with Occupy Wall Street. So, I think your analysis of what could potentially happen, yes, I do think, your scenario could obviously play out. I think, though, because we're in this global reset, if you will, the criminal class, particularly the Federal Reserve and the other central banks that are run by the 1% wealthiest, most powerful people in the world, they want the chaos. They want the destabilization campaigns sweeping the Middle East. They want it here in America. Because the only way, Christopher, that they can get to the reset, that they can then usher in a new order, a new global financial system, is by having complete and utter chaos. And then they could say, okay, well, we're now going to pose as the saviors. We're now going to pose as the ones that are going to fix everything, even though we're the ones who really created the problem. But, the time span of the attention span of people is very short, so by then people will say, okay, well, I forgot that these are the people that created the problem. They're now presenting the solution. Let me go with it. So I think that's kind of what. So yeah, I could expect these Occupy movements to grow. They're already getting violent, but they'll continue to get violent until eventually I think the people are begging government to stop the violence, begging government to do something.
Yeah, and I think those are really pertinent points. And maybe what we get is a combination of both scenarios. Maybe there's a little violence, maybe there's that unrest. There's evidently the chaos. I mean, we've already got it right now, and we're starting to see some violence emerge. And I think the evidence for, I guess, both of these scenarios or both of these cases that we're making will be just to see what happens. I mean, if this movement is allowed to continue and grow through the winter months and it is not quelled by force, then we know that the elite class and the powers that be want this to escalate. And they want to see this movement to its fruition. Because I'm telling you right now, if the top 0.01% wanted to use and implement force against the American people right now, this very minute, they could easily do it. A military could be out in the streets. They could be sending all these people home right now. So if they don't use that trump card, then we know we can kind of see the intelligent design behind what's really happening.
Yeah, I think that's very true. You know, to a question you made before the break, which was how do we restore the constitutional republic, I think it comes in a couple of different steps. The first step is that once people realize that actual liberty that they've come to take for granted is being taken away. I think more and more people are waking up to that fact every single day. You know, and there's been there's estimates of over 100 billion people have lived on planet Earth since basically the recorded history of man. And out of those 100+ billion, less than 5 billion people have lived in any semblance of freedom and liberty that we could even recognize. There has only been about 20 governments throughout the world that have had any type of liberty and freedom, again, that we could recognize for longer than 50 years. America has had it for over 200 years. Some would argue we've lost it since 1913. You know, that's an argument that could be made successfully. But let's just say, for purposes of this conversation, we've had it for 200+ years. That's exceptional. That is different. That's what makes this country different. But people need to realize we are losing the freedom. We're losing the liberty. It can go very quickly. So that's one way of restoring the republic. The second way is through education. You know, I'm a firm believer in the principles of someone like Gandhi. I mean, he's somebody who, you know, was running around in pajamas, and he took on the British Empire. I mean, literally defeated the British Empire through complete nonviolence, massive civil disobedience. And once he started to really lay it down, the movement took off by itself, where all over India you had millions of people protesting nonviolent civil disobedience, and we need that here. We need, I mean, imagine, Christopher, 1 million+ people surrounding the Federal Reserve, demanding Ben Bernanke step down, demanding a congressional audit, and demanding that it be abolished. Or, you know, because we need to restore back to some kind of sound money system, one of the first steps would be 1 million+ people surrounding Fort Knox. We want to see the people's gold to make sure we can restore back to a dollar backed by gold. So I think these are the types of things that we can do to really show the elites that the massive, the sleeping giant, if you will, is awake and they're ready to take their republic back.
Yeah, well, I can see that, and I can imagine it. I can personally imagine millions of people swarming the Federal Reserve and swarming Washington and swarming New York City, and I think that very well could be where we're headed. My fear is, and I think there's millions of Americans also very fearful of this, is what is the replacement? What do we get? How do we ensure that we restore, again, freedom and liberty, and that we just don't get, you know, a replacement dictatorship? Who's funding this thing? Because, you know, I'd love to, we're trying to help, for example. Here we are, just, you know, a couple lone voices among millions. We're trying to help. We're trying to do something good. But look, I don't know about you. I don't have trillions of dollars to back any kind of, you know, movement here. Where's the leadership? I keep going back to the leadership. Who's going to take the bull by the horns here and make sure that we do not have a criminal elite class replacing the old criminal elite class at the end of the day? How do we maintain any semblance of a republic that we want to keep and that we're putting to the test now? You know, there's times in history where we've seen this, where you have to put the system to the test, and now's that time. What are your thoughts?
Well, I would say this, to take a step back first, because, you know, there's this story of this guy that, you know, tried to change the world, spent years trying to change the world. He couldn't do that. And then he's like, you know what, I'm going to try to change my country. He spent years doing that. Couldn't do that. He said, I'm going to change my state. And then he couldn't do that. But he finally realized that, you know, if I would have started to try to first change myself and then my family would have changed my community would have changed my state would have changed my country would have changed the world. And I think that if we all start as individuals, that power that we have been given, that freedom we've been given as individuals via our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, and these rights that we have that are endowed by the Creator. They can't be taken away by government. They can't be taken away by Obama or by George Bush or by the TSA, because God has literally granted us these rights. I think that if we if we start at home and we say, you know what, I'm going to opt out of the system. I'm going to homeschool my kids. I'm going to, I'm not going to have my money in one of these Wall Street banks. I'm not going to shop at their stores. If we start taking steps like these as individuals, and we could begin to I think, make some changes and be examples for those in our family and in our community. And it takes that just very simple step in the right direction to move into something that becomes a massive movement of maximum liberty and freedom.
Yeah, and that's very noble, and I think that's what a lot of people are striving for. And I think maybe we've just illustrated a very good point, is that this movement, as many of us have talked about before, needs to be twofold. The great positive is that this is creating all kinds of awareness among millions of people around the globe. Awareness of what's taking place, awareness of the criminally run private Federal Reserve, awareness of these, politicians and these bankers looting the system. People are coming to terms with what reality is and where this country is headed. And people are getting angry because they're feeling this in their own life. And, millions of people are losing their homes, or millions of people are losing their jobs, or are underemployed. So this is becoming part of the human consciousness and a part of the human collective. But we also need to take that second, just as important step, maybe more important, by shutting off the current system, by not doing business with these criminal institutions, by not doing business with banks like Bank of America, and not supporting this system that is hurting us, the same system that is destroying us, that is turning America into a wasteland, into this, soulless place, this desolate, I can't think of a better term, but I think people understand where I'm going with this. What's your take on Europe, Fabian? Because here we have D-Day tomorrow, tomorrow, Wednesday, kind of marking the culmination of all these bailout talks. We've got the Sarkozy-Merkel love affair, being, publicly broadcasted pretty much every day now. I want to read you a quote. It says, "The sovereign debt crisis threatens the very existence of the Eurozone," said Howard Archer, chief European economist at IHS Global. "It is therefore absolutely imperative that European policymakers finally deliver a major package." Do they deliver, or is this a huge failure?
Well, I think even if they do deliver, it might be something like we saw in May of 2010, where they came out with this big rescue package and the Dow skyrockets next day and everybody's been saved. And, it's this ongoing 20-month saga of the Greek debt crisis, the euro crisis, the pigs. I think eventually we know where all of this ends. And you hit the nail actually right on the head. We have an economy that demands infinite growth. One of my subscribers sent me this essay that they wrote that was really brilliant, and it's something that I've talked about in the past as well, but he summarized it really well. But we have a system that's infinite growth, but we have finite resources on the planet. So those two, eventually they come to a peak, and they can't continue. The growth just, can't continue the system that we have now. But I think Europe is, I think that Greece will definitely default. The Germans, I believe, are already planning for possibly a gold-backed Deutschmark.
Fabian, hold that thought. We got to go to a quick break here. I want to get into that because I think a Greek default is inevitable. We'll also be taking calls. I see the phone lines lighting up. We'll be getting all that in just a few. Hey, everybody. I'm Christopher Green. We're back from our break. This is Greenwave Radio Live. I'm here with Fabian for Liberty. It's kind of funny. I was thinking to myself over the break, the American economy, the American stock market really is kind of like the stock Netflix. The great success story, supposedly, as long as they're living in non-reality, it's great. The stock skyrockets, triples, quadruples in value on zero fundamentals, hits about $300 a share. And then when the CEO realizes that they have to end the Ponzi scheme and actually raise prices to make any kind of profit, 60-some%, everything collapses. And you have days like today where the stock's down 35%, and it's literally trading a third of what it originally was trading at. Trading, I guess, at the close today at around $77. So as long as we're in la-la land, as long as we're in bailout, quantitative easing land, everything's great. As long as we continue to fabricate growth, everything's great. But the minute reality comes, welcome to the, national holocaust, which is where I think we're going. And case in point, I'm reading this about the Eurozone agreement. It says under a July agreement, bondholders had agreed to a 20% reduction with Greek debt. Okay, but later estimates come out suggesting they're going to need write-downs of 50% or more. So this is how wrong these people are. They couldn't be any more wrong. 20% downgrade turns into a 50% downgrade, turns into a 100% downgrade. This is where we are in the real world. I want to go to one of our patient callers here. Hi, you're on Greenwave Radio Live. Can you hear me, my friend?
Hello?
Yes, you're on Greenwave Radio Live. How are you doing?
Pretty good, and yourself?
Doing really well. What's on your mind?
Well, I had a couple things on my mind, really. You were saying that the police state is coming, and I just want to, I beg to differ. I think it's already here. Because anytime when you have the people down on Occupy Wall Street and just wade in and start beating people, and there's no ramifications for that, that lets me know that it's here. So that's one statement I wanted to make. The other one is with the Occupy Wall Street, I'm glad that it's spread around. I'm glad that the people are, out there in the street or whatever, but in another sense, I'm saddened because it's already co-opted, and it was, it may have been put up by George Soros and those people, but a lot of people bought into it when the police started beating on people. A lot of other people started adding on, joining to that. But you can already see that it's co-opted by the Marxists and the communists and all those. I'm not really with the commie type. I still believe in the country.
You don't want communism in America.
Absolutely not. That would be more idiotic than anything.
Well, I would agree with you there. And regarding, the police state already being here, I would agree with that. I think the point that I was making is I think it really escalates, especially as we approach 2012. It'll be obvious to everybody. There's a few of us awake, that understand it's already here. Fabian, what's your take on this? Has the movement been co-opted by the commies and the socialists?
Well, definitely there's an element of Occupy Wall Street that are radical Marxist revolutionaries that want to, in essence, destroy the Western way of life. So I think the majority of any leadership there may be in that movement do fall into that category. You can see this by some of the signs you read. You can see this by money, where they're getting their money. So, and you can see this by multiple interviews that have been done with so many of them. Like you said, you attended Occupy Phoenix. I've attended Occupy Tampa. I attended in the first week of the Occupy movement. I'd say half of the crowd was Ron Paul supporters and the Federalist supporters. But there were some hardcore communists there that I think are completely ignorant, clueless about the history of communism. But so yeah, they're definitely a part of the Occupy Wall Street movement. There's no question of it.
Yeah, it's something to think about too, and I maybe want to illustrate to our audience. Look, whatever your ideology is, that's fine. In fact, bring out an open discussion. This is what America's about. There's nothing more American than having a disagreement among different people and different thought processes and different religions. So if you're a communist or socialist and that's your viewpoint, hey, maybe you're a Nazi or a fascist, fine. Let's hear your viewpoint. Let's hear it in a peaceful way. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best direction, for this country. It makes me think of the video that I put out on Michael Moore, the filmmaker, who really is just kind of a catch-22 in himself. Here he is. He's made millions of dollars on the capitalist system, making these movies, yet he's really pushing for the socialist agenda. Pretty interesting video. If you haven't watched it, I suggest you do. It looks like our last caller was cutting out, so I want to thank them for calling in. See here if we can go to another question. Hi, you're on Greenwave Radio Live.
Hey, how you doing, Chris?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing, my friend?
Pretty good. Listen, I want to change gears a little here and present a question for you and Fabian, especially on the heels of this murder of Gaddafi. Listen, look, at one point, does this world hegemony, this is really what I'm really getting to. This is what really scares me more so than the economic collapse of this country. I think we see the handwriting on it, at least I do, in Occupy Wall Street. what really scares me is all of this military aggression all over the globe and all of these military bases that the United States seems to be. Now we're going to open up AFRICOM with, I'm assuming, a military base in Libya. At what point does Russia and China step in and say, listen, this is, at what point and what interest will they have to put the United States down as the wild dog that we seem to be, the rabid dog that we seem to be all over the globe? At what point do we go too far? Just like in Nazi Germany, Hitler went too far. There was a point where he just went too far. He tried to take on too much too fast, and ultimately it ended up in that regime's demise. The United States is just another aggressive military-industrial complex war machine right now in history. We are the Nazi Germany. We are the aggressors. We are the world tyrants. At what point does one of these nuclear powers step in and say, listen, enough is enough? They've already threatened and it really expelled China out of a lot of its interest in the continent of Africa. Their goal, I'm assuming, is to take over the entire Mediterranean. They want all the oil interests and all the other resources that they can gobble up. Aside from just, the economic front, what is your serious opinion, and this question goes for either you or Fabian, what's the timetable do you see on one of these other superpowers saying, listen, this can't go on any farther. This military aggression is going to be met with aggression. Putin put out, I don't know, a statement, if you're aware of it, a while back, stating that, listen, any type of, we don't have all the fancy gadgets like the Predator drones and all this. We don't. But what we do have is, a crap load, a stockpile of nuclear weapons over here. Any formidable aggression towards the United States will be immediately met with a thermonuclear war.
Well, to answer that question, and I'll give you my quick take, and then I'll throw it over to Fabian to answer. Look, I think we're already headed there. So, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I honestly believe, my honest opinion, one of the objectives of placing Obama as the pawn, at the helm of the presidency over the past few years was to accelerate and enter World War III. I think we're already there. I think the history books will prove it's already begun. And look, pulling troops out of Iraq this late in the game is a moot point. This is just a politicking, by the Democratic administration. And look, I'm happy for who's coming home. I'm happy for the troops coming home. But keep in mind, we're still net two wars, Libya and Afghanistan. And it's my opinion that the Iraq troop withdrawal will be quickly replaced. It will be a replacement for an invasion in either Iran or Syria. Now, we're already seeing this out of Senator McCain talking about how we should go in and take out other dictators and should make a move in Syria on the ground. So we're already hearing this. So we have a trade war, we have a currency war, and we have, emerging markets like China. I think when the real collapse comes is when we see China's growth collapse, which I think we could already be headed that direction. We could very much see this play out in 2012. We could see their real estate market implode. Keep in mind, you can't sustain, in my opinion, real GDP growth of anywhere from 8 to 12% on an annual basis into infinity. It just doesn't happen. Even if these are the emerging markets, there's still going to be severe troughs. Keep in mind, the United States, where we sit today, experienced the 1930s Great Depression, and we were the superpower over the past 234 years. So I think that we're headed that direction. I think World War III is already here. I expect all of this to accelerate in the very near term. Fabian, you've got about a minute before we go to our break. How would you respond to that?
Well, two quick things. I would say that the pulling the troops out of Iraq actually makes that country much less stable, and it's just part of the overall destabilization campaign spreading the Middle East, because we need to be positioned for the natural resources in order to continue to grow economies and continue the infinite growth Ponzi scheme. So that's one thing. Regarding China and Russia, drawing a line in the sand, if you will, and saying, hey, we're going to take you on, I think that potentially could happen in the future, but I think it's already happening economically with China entering into bilateral trade agreements with the Russians outside of the dollar, with the Brazilians outside of the dollar, using their dollar surplus to, instead of buying treasuries, to buy gold. So even though China has a lot of problems, I do think their economy is slowing down. I don't see their economy so much collapsing as I see them possibly entering some kind of U.S.-style Great Depression from the 19th.
We'll be back here in just a few, guys.
No rules, no rules, no taboo topics, no taboo topics, no fear of doom, no fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio, American Freedom Radio.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? You now entering the Daily Wave, hosted by Mr. Christopher Green himself. On me, I'm just a fellow truth speaker. I go by the name of Doctrine. Welcome to the Daily Wave, starring Christopher
Hey everybody,
Green.
I'm Christopher Green. This is Green Wave Radio Live. We're back from the break. Quickly just wanted to apologize to Fabian for Liberty. We kind of got cut off there before we went to the last break. I did want to mention again and thank him for coming on the show today. A lot of great insight. If you haven't checked him out, check him out at Fabian for Liberty on YouTube. Or again, that's internetanchorman.tv. Also has a documentary coming out. Very interesting. Stay tuned for this called The Liberty Option. He's got a couple trailers out. We'll make sure to have him back on the program when that debuts officially. Now, I'm going to be bringing on Tom Mullen in just a few minutes here. He's going to be making his debut on Green Wave TV. He's a writer, musician, business consultant. In January 2009, he published his first book, A Return to Common Sense, Reawakening Liberty and the Inhabitants of America. He was the opening speaker at the Revolution March in Washington, D.C. in 2008, a keynote speaker for Ron Paul, and he's been a featured speaker at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, Campaign for Liberty, and numerous campus and community-based organizations, as well as making frequent appearances on Freedom Watch with Judge Andrew Napolitano on Fox News and RT's Adam vs. the Man. Tom, very excited to have you here on the program. Can you hear me, my friend?
Yes, I can, and thanks for having me on.
No problem. Great having you on the show. You know, we've been having a kind of hardcore, in-your-face discussion today with Occupy Wall Street, where this could potentially be headed. It's been a little grim, quite frankly. You know, we're talking about the possibility and potential for violence erupting, it being used as a reason to quell the protests and really implement the police state here in the United States of America. We're talking about the ongoing collapse of the Eurozone, as I'm sure you're well aware of. We have D-Day in Europe tomorrow, you know, where they're supposedly going to be announcing some kind of additional, you know, bailout to infinity measure. You know, I lose track because there's so many of these quantitative easing programs and, you know, EFSFs and, you know, new utility bailout vehicles. It's easy to really lose track of where we're headed. What's your take on all this?
Well, unfortunately, and this is very similar, in my opinion, to the kind of mirror image movement, which is the Tea Party movement. You've got people with a legitimate gripe, in my opinion, but, you know, after decades and decades of just bad ideas, bad education, you've got them kind of arguing against the wrong things. They're kind of in the ballpark, but they haven't found their seat. And what I mean by that is that they seem to have a grudge against the free market system, which, you know, I would argue doesn't even exist in the United States, instead of, you know, exactly what they're probably going to call for more of, which is all of this government intervention. And they don't question the basic foundation upon which our economic system is built, which I would argue is a foundation of organized theft. And instead of questioning that, they're looking to rearrange the way the loot is distributed, and that's just never going to work. We've been trying that for decades and decades and decades. We've got to question the system itself and start examining fundamental assumptions if you're ever going to solve any of these problems.
You know, one of the points that we were debating in the first hour was, you know, we have this decentralized movement. Is it possible to have a real, you know, second American-style revolution in this country with a decentralized movement? And my question has continued to be, where's the leadership? You know, we need somebody with a moral compass to, you know, emerge from the chaos, so to speak, and in my opinion, lead us in a positive direction. I mean, if you just said yourself, we don't have a free market system in this country anymore. We have a system that is clearly broken, that is shattered into a million pieces of broken glass. How do we accomplish any of these goals In your opinion, Tom, is it possible to have any kind of real change in a leaderless environment?
Well, I'm always suspicious of looking to a leader to solve our problems. That's kind of the assumption that the so-called progressive movement, and that could be conservative or liberal depending on what day it is or what year it is. That's their assumption, that there's a small group of experts that can make our decisions better for us, and that we're going to have to sacrifice our basic fundamental property rights, most of all, and a lot of other rights to them, and in exchange they'll give us comfort, security, and safety. And I think, in a very general way, that has been our assumption for at least 100 years, maybe longer. And, I think that the real answer has to come from Americans facing the facts and saying there's a lot of things that I even support that are part of this problem. And, the way I look at it is, and being a libertarian, I obviously look at it this way. Everything comes down to a property right, whether it's your body, whether it's your mind, your conscience, what you believe, what you don't believe, and what you do with the product of your labor, which is, whatever money you earn or whatever property you acquire. And we have a system that's based on that can be taken away from you, that your money can be taken from you and given to somebody else for good intentions or bad. And, the supreme manifestation of that is the banking system, where, you can inflate the currency because you're going to create jobs and all this great stuff. And, people have to recognize that the only way that you do that, if you're going to loan me money for my company to hire new people, and that money didn't exist yesterday, well, that purchasing power can't just be created out of thin air. It must have been taken from somebody else. And the somebody else is every other holder of a U.S. dollar. And that's really the most destructive problem, in my opinion. And until people really start to realize that, then all of the rest, all the other bad decisions politicians make, pale in comparison to the damage that the banking system does.
So, in your opinion, Tom, are we too far gone? Are we past the point of no return? Or can the country be saved? Or do we need a complete reset and reboot of the entire financial and political system? I'd probably I do lean to that side of the coin. And you were talking about, we've got to be questioning and fearful of any potential leader that emerges. And I'd actually agree with that statement. I mean, we could be sitting in an environment where we have the next Hitler emerge, and they're telling the people that they have all the answers to everybody's problems. But on the other side of the coin, are we really confident in allowing the masses decide what's in our self-interest? I mean, is it not true that the smartest people in the room should probably be leading things? Or maybe it needs to be dumbed down. Maybe the guy that isn't that smart could do a better job than the supposed financial geniuses that have, screwed up the entire financial system.
That we have to come to grips, we have to rediscover, reawaken liberty, if you will, the principle that every individual makes their own decisions. And all that a leader is supposed to do is protect the right to do so. And, a lot of libertarians even think as far as a government or a state is concerned, even that's a problem. But at the very most, that any leader should be doing is to protect everyone's right to make their own decisions with their own lives, with their own bodies, and with their own money. And when you have a system like that, and you have millions of people making their own independent decisions the best they can, history proves that is the most productive system. You get the most equitable distribution of wealth. I mean, one of the biggest fallacies is that it's a free market system that has caused the 1% to have all the wealth. No, it's been all of this government intervention that protects corporations from competition. It drives money towards places where people didn't choose to spend it. And again, I come back to it. It takes away people's money without their consent. And of course, then you get all these ridiculous outcomes and huge bubbles and everything else. And at the base of it, when you can change the value of money itself and therefore redistribute wealth silently like that, that's where you get the biggest problems.
So, Tom, what are your thoughts on Occupy Wall Street, off the cuff? Where is this headed? How does it end, if you were to make a guess?
Well, from what I've read, it's hard to say. I think it's a very diverse movement, just like the Tea Party is. There's some libertarians who get disgruntled with the Tea Party and say, oh, they're all neocon conservatives, but that's not really true. There's some neocon conservatives in it. There's some libertarians in it. There's some what you'd call maybe classical liberals in it. There's all kinds of people. There's liberals in the Tea Party. But with Occupy Wall Street, I've seen people holding up a sign for just about everything. Some kooky things and some things that I think are misinformed and some things where I think they're right on. And I think that, what they have to recognize is what's causing the problem. Because what I hear is greed causes the problem. But then you have to ask yourself, okay, if greed causes all of these distortions, why does the price of things that government doesn't regulate go down? Why can poor people afford cell phones and internet, but they can't afford health care? And my answer to that is, the people who sell cell phones are just as greedy, but they have to get people to voluntarily buy their products. They got to find a way to serve that market that can't afford to spend too much. And if you call it greed to want to get that business, well, they want that business. Somebody wants to sell a phone to someone who can only afford $20, and that's why those products exist. Now, when you've got a government-provided service, the government makes people buy the product for other people. And so that whole mechanism, that whole freedom of choice that drives the market goes away, and that's where you get these distortions. And, the other thing I hear from the Occupy Wall Street movement was, the fact that all these derivatives were the real cause of the problems. You got to ask, how did those derivatives come into existence? If you didn't have distorting factors like Fannie and Freddie, the Community Reinvestment Act, if you didn't have the government saying, if that loan defaults, I'll get the taxpayer to back it up, then you wouldn't have all those derivatives either. So, you got to look to the fundamental problem, and the fundamental problem is the absence of recognition of property rights.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you were also talking about government intervention being the root of a lot of the problems, and that's exactly the case today. And the problem with it, a lot of Americans have, I certainly have, is nothing has changed. Here we are tomorrow, Wednesday, and we're talking about another bailout, the creation of the EFSF, that is there to backstop future losses and ensure that you can't lose. And that's the problem with where we are right now, is we've got an elite class that can't lose. And then you've got the middle class that does nothing but pretty much lose. And here we have kneecapped entrepreneurship in this country, and we're going to see more and more excessive taxation and austerity come to the United States of America, just like we're seeing in places like Greece and coming to the rest of Europe. How does this end? And if property rights, as you say, are central to this theme and movement, what else should be at the top of the list? Are you a proponent of ending the Federal Reserve?
Oh, absolutely, because the Federal Reserve is antithetical to property rights. Its very existence. It can't do one thing in its mission. It can't exercise one of its so-called tools in its toolbox without violating a property right. If it expands the currency, it gives purchasing power to a business or a corporation or a group of them, and it takes that purchasing power from somebody else. Even when it contracts the currency, it's overriding contract rights, because let's say that I, did my best to take a reasonable loan based on conditions that are natural in the market, and the Federal Reserve comes in and shrinks the money supply, and now, money is more scarce and the interest rates go up. Well, that's also a form of theft, too, at least a violation of a contract, if not theft. So everything they do is based on the idea that no individual has any rights, and we're going to achieve these aggregate goals for the collective on behalf of or at the expense of those rights. And you got to get rid of it. You got to get rid of it completely. But that's only the first step. You got to get rid of fractional reserve banking, because history shows that's always failed without a central bank to back it up.
Now, Tom, what is your opinion? We just had the assassination of Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. I'm not sure if you saw the brutal videos. There's a few floating around, a bloodied face or just carrying his body around. Really just kind of a public execution, really. I mean, there's no beating around the bush. We see the guy get shot in the head. A lot of people argue, hey, this guy deserved to die. There's nothing wrong with, showcasing this on YouTube and sharing it around the world. To all kinds of people. I'm sure a lot of children are watching this. What are your thoughts on this barbaric society that really nothing's changed? I mean, this is no different from the public executions that we had thousands of years ago and the beheadings by the guillotine. The only difference now is that it's just we put it up on social media for the world to see. And, the United States funds these operations overseas. And they're planning on taking out more dictators. What are your thoughts on these public executions and the American hit list to kill anybody and anything that they so desire?
Well, I want to tread carefully here because I certainly wouldn't want to give anyone the impression that I'm an endorser of Muammar Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or any other dictator. But there's two things. There's one image that immediately jumped into my mind when I first read the story about Gaddafi and how he was killed. I remember, I don't know if you remember Saddam Hussein's execution. I'm sure you can still find it on YouTube. But as bad a dictator as he probably was, if half of what the U.S. government tells us is true about him, when he was finally executed, he died very bravely. And to me, the people who were the cowards were the people leading him to the noose and taunting him while he was praying. And it's just struck me, is this the image that we want to be associated with? It seems to me like we got into the Iraq thing, and our whole, reasoning flopped around a little between weapons of mass destruction and freeing the Iraqis. But we really got in the middle of a blood feud, like a tribal blood feud. And that's what it seems like happens to us in every one of these Middle East countries. And we end up on the side of people who, in the long run, end up either fighting against us with the weapons we gave them or committing these acts, and we shouldn't want to have any part of that. We should be, we want nothing to do with that. In fact, we used to show the video of people being beheaded with, dull knives and saying, this is why we're fighting the wars, because we're not like this. We're America. We're good. We're not, we don't have anything to do with this, and now, our allies are doing the same thing. It's just, we should be extricating ourselves from the whole situation and having nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair, upfront analysis of what's happening. We all need to ask the question, how is what we saw with the execution of Muammar Gaddafi any different from, again, like you said, Americans getting their heads chopped off with butter knives, as we remember those videos, being floated around the internet. I don't think that there's an argument to say that that's right. And, of course, we're not endorsing these dictators, but it's a very slippery slope. We've got to go to a quick break. We're also going to be going to our callers, so please give us a call. I'm here with Tom Mullen. We'll be back in a few. Hey, everybody. I'm Christopher Green. We're back from the break. This is Green Wave Radio Live. I'm here with popular writer, musician, business consultant Tom Mullen. And we're talking really just about the terror that's spreading all over the world, the public execution and assassination of figures such as Muammar Gaddafi, Anwar al-Awlaki, U.S. citizens. I want for a moment to go to some of our callers. If you want to get in the queue, our lines are lighting up. You can call us at 402-237-2525. You're on Green Wave Radio Live. Can you hear me?
Hey, Chris.
Yes, hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I wanted to call in about this. We got this, talk about this high-tech, police state we live in. And, because I pretty much live it every day, because, that's what I do for a living.
What exactly do you do for a living?
I'm a security contractor, and, and we, where I work at, we fall under Homeland Security. There's a lot of stuff I can't talk about, but, I'm beginning to wonder if if we do ever have a martial law type scenario, if we may be used as to quell dissent in this country.
Well, I think that's it's a pretty big question. Maybe, a very valid question. I think that's where we're headed. I think that's what we have here in the United States today. Take a look at the technology, what's opened the door to massive innovation and new media, like the media you're listening to right now, we could argue could be used to really just kind of add all of us into an encyclopedia of people that are dissenters. And, when the crap so-called hits the fan, we could be running into a real-world police state style situation here in the United States where we have very limited, freedom and liberty in this country. So it's a huge concern. And we have this now with the TSA and Homeland Security and traffic stops and, the fact that they came out with some kind of new law in Louisiana last week that says you can't do any secondhand transactions in cash.
Yeah, I heard about that.
It's extremely concerning. The fact that more Americans aren't up in arms, over these issues perplexes me. Tom, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it all goes back to the basic fundamental problem, which is that the American philosophy has vanished from the minds of American people. If you go back to 1776, when Thomas Paine said government is at best, a necessary evil, and some libertarians think he was only half right, and that it only existed to protect our lives, liberties, and property. And it wasn't allowed to do anything else. And of course, in protecting our lives, liberties, and property, it couldn't violate those things while it was protecting them. And slowly, we really we've given away property, like I said, 100 years ago, maybe more. Liberty has been eroding, and it all falls under this idea that some small group of experts know what's best for most people, and what they think is best for most people trumps the rights of any individuals. And you could even make a case that now that we kill American citizens with flying robots, that they don't even protect life anymore. Of course, we've had all these wars over the last 100 years, the result of big democratic governments. But, at least they were killing people in other countries. At least you were killed by somebody from another country. And now we've crossed that line where we can kill an American citizen without a trial. So it's really all gone. The whole philosophy is gone. And to me, you're not going to elect a leader who's going to change that. You might elect a few good leaders that might fight the system. But the Americans have to educate themselves. They have to question the fundamental assumptions, and they have to give up that part of the collectivism that they think benefits them. The retirement benefits or the medical benefits, or if you're connected to the military establishment, whatever benefit you think you get from that, you've got to unplug and reject that and say, look, I'm going to do without that because with it, I have no liberty and maybe no life anymore. And those are the costs. Our lives, our liberties, and our property are the costs of the supposed benefits that the experts give us. And it's failing all around. Everywhere you look, those assumptions are coming to their logical end. Bankruptcy, warfare, bloodshed, depravity, those all come from giving up that individual liberty that was once made America, kind of the shining light on the hill.
What is your opinion of the withdrawal of troops in Iraq and the timing surrounding it? Is this a political move? Does this have good intentions? What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't believe that every politician is evil. I don't believe that they ever make decisions based on what they think is best for their constituents. I think, the political dynamic is skewed for self-interest of the politician. It could be, it's just, we got to pull back somewhere. We're broke, we're bankrupt. This is all, being maintained on an illusion that people are going to keep buying our treasury bonds and accepting those little green pieces of paper and giving us their stuff. And, we can, even the politicians can see it's ending, and it might be that. It might just be the hand is being forced. It might be to redeploy them somewhere else. I don't know. I doubt that it's going to be trumpeted as, we're changing our philosophy here at all. We're still obviously think that our military should be involved in the affairs of everyone in the world. So
sure.
We'll have to wait and see.
We're still net 2 wars, and we're talking about invasion in Syria and Iran, and we're in parts of northern Africa, not just Libya, but other parts of Africa as well. So this is all escalating. Another fundamental question I think a lot of the Occupy Wall Street protesters are trying to address and is in the collective conscious is, what do we do with these too big to fail, bailed out banks? What do we do with these guys? I think it's a very simple solution. I think we drive them to zero right now and just take these guys to bankruptcy like any other firm would do in a capitalist system. But how do we do that now after having bailed out these companies with taxpayer infusions and just kicking the can down the road into infinity? Is there any easy solution to it, or do we just shut these guys down right now as we speak, and at the very least just withdraw all of our money out of these crony criminal institutions?
Well, I think it's never too late to stop throwing good money after bad. That's one thing. Don't bail them out anymore. The big problem now is Europe. The big problem this week is Europe. I mean, it could be the United States next week as soon as that. But I don't think you have to do anything but stop doing bad things. You don't have to do a prescription for a cure. You have to stop doing bad things, which is stop redistributing wealth. The regulatory structure, and this is what frustrates me so much about the liberals, because I'd like to stand with them against this thing if we could agree on what we're really fighting against. The regulatory structure that they support wholeheartedly is what keeps these corporations big. It's why they don't have more competitors. It's what keeps those banks powerful. It's what concentrates wealth. And, Thomas Jefferson said that government power is limited to acts that are injurious to others, and that's all the law should restrain us from. So if you've got regulations 10 feet high, you pick out the laws that say you can't harm someone else, and everything else, you light a match to. And then you've got a vibrant economy with all kinds of new firms entering the market, and, you start to see that natural market force dissipate those unnaturally large companies.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is we're not allowing natural market forces to take root. Again, there's no economics where we have a government and a system and a Federal Reserve that is supplying and propping up losers, which is exactly what these companies are. They're not winners, they're losers. It's the equivalent of giving the gold medal to the guy that came in last place and shunning Michael Phelps, even though he won, 7 gold medals, I think it was, off the top of my head. So you're reinforcing fraud, you're reinforcing corruption. Let's go to one of our callers to get their take. Again, if you got a question for myself or Tom, please give us a call. You're on Green Wave Radio Live.
Hey, Chris, how are you, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. What's on your mind, my friend?
Hey, I've been listening to your show. I've been listening to the last few callers and stuff that have called in. I just want to give everybody a little dose of reality here because, first of all, I just want to tell you that your program, what you do, I love it, man, and Alex Jones and people like that. There's not many news programs out there that really are really giving the, I want to say, the correct information to people as far as, what's going on and stuff. But, this country and people in this country want to claim that we're a Christian nation, and they want to claim, that that's who we are. Yet I never hear anybody talk about the biblical perspective of what's happening right now. And things right now in this world, I've studied prophecy for the last 10 years of my life and current events, and it's very difficult to make sense of what's going on if the only thing you have in your hand is a newspaper and people's opinions. And when you put the scriptures together with current events and what's happening, we are at the end of the end, Chris, and this war with Syria, the fall of Egypt and Libya is a very specific prophecy in the book of Daniel, chapter 11, verse 41 through 45, the fall of Libya and Egypt, and then the next thing to happen is Isaiah chapter 17 prophecy, which is the destruction of Damascus, which is the city inside of Syria. Syria is the next thing that they're going after. And when people are wondering what's going to happen, to put aside all the speculation, that's why God gave us those prophecies, because they tell us what's going to happen, and it's not going to be a Libya situation. Isaiah 17 very specifically says that Damascus will be destroyed in 1 hour, and then it will happen at evening time, and by the morning it will be a ruinous heap. The president of Syria, Assad, has told Israel that they will destroy Tel Aviv and have Hamas and Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran launch an all-out assault on Israel if NATO and the U.S. do what they did to Libya. That will be what starts the 7-year tribulation period, very shortly followed by the Psalm 83 war, which will be an invasion of those nations against Israel, and then all hell will break loose on this planet, and there's not going to be a systematic control takedown. We are seeing prophecies escalate by the day now, with these nations being overthrown. And the thing that everybody wants to ignore, and one thing I never heard Alex Jones talk about, I love what he does, but is the Israel situation, because Jesus very specifically said that Israel would be a burdensome stone to the world in the end. And what's happening right now with this peace talk about dividing Jerusalem, that's one of the that's one of the last signs before tribulation and the Antichrist. So when this happens, these people that are running this new world order, they're not politicians. They're Luciferians. They're very, very evil people. And there's a dark side behind this. It's not just political. And when people get into the politics about, democracy and Republicans and Democrats and the Fed, people need to move beyond that, because there's a whole different realm working forces behind the scenes, spiritual forces that are in control of this. And very soon, God's going to say enough. And he's going to unleash his wrath. And we are very, very, very close to that. So just for your listeners, that's where we're headed. The speculation, God gave us the scriptures. It's right there. And we're at the end of the end right now. So this next thing with Syria, that will be it. And that will launch us into the new world order, the Antichrist. He will come on the scene. Ahmadinejad from Iran, he's trying to usher in the 12th Imam. That's why he's building his nuke. So all the ancient religions and cultures speak of this time, but the Bible, it has its own perspective on what's going to take forth, and it's right there, Chris. So I just want to tell everybody that so they can look into the scriptures and find out, read the book of Revelation, read the book of Daniel, Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog. Your last listener asked, when's Russia going to get involved? The Bible talks about when Russia's going to get involved. They will come against Israel in that war, and I believe what we're headed for right now in the very, very near future is a false flag Armageddon. It won't be Armageddon. Armageddon is at the very end, the 7-year tribulation, but the wars that happen now are the Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, the destruction of Syria, and the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And that will usher in the 7-year tribulation. And the mark of the beast, the RFID... I'm sorry, Chris?
From a guy like yourself who studied biblical prophecy for 10 years, what's your opinion with the rise of the Antichrist? Is that person already here on the scene? I
don't believe he is. I believe the Bible talks about Second Thessalonians chapter 2, the restrainer. It says in the Bible that he who is restraining will do so until the lawless one is revealed, and then the restrainer will be removed. I personally believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. The Bible says we are not appointed to wrath, but unto salvation, and the tribulation is for the Israel rejecting the Messiah, and for the judgment of the nations and the Gentiles for rejecting Christ, and the bride of Christ will be taken, I very firmly believe, and then God will step back and he will not restrain evil. The only thing that's being restrained right now is God's Holy Spirit is stopping these things from. A lot of things could have happened. It could have broke loose in Israel this April when they unleashed hell on Israel, and Israel almost went to war with Hamas, and Egypt said, "Don't, we're going to invade you." The oil spill thing. Everybody was saying if a hurricane hits, it's going to wipe out the whole south part of America. Not one hurricane hit. God has been restraining things and sending very strong warnings, and now He just sent a warning to Turkey. 7.2 earthquake. They're getting rocked. They've had hundreds of earthquakes, big 4s, big 5s, hundreds of them consistently for the last 2 days, right on the border of Turkey and Iran. Turkey is threatening Israel with war right now, and God's sending a very strong message not to do that.
Hold on to that thought, my friend. I really appreciate you calling in and your insight. We do have to go over to a quick break. Everybody hold on. We'll be back here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody. I'm Christopher Green. This is Greenwave Radio Live. I'm here with Tom Mullen. We just had a call from one of our listeners talking about Bible prophecy, what he sees coming down the pike in the very near future. A lot of what he's saying is chilling, I must say. And I see the evil all around us on a daily basis, and I see it on a macro scale, looking at how these politicians and these bankers are acting and the things that they're promoting and propagating is evil. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. I don't know if, Tom, you are someone specializing in Bible prophecy per se, but what's your take, perspective on all this in the comments from our viewer a few minutes ago?
Yeah, well, religious belief is a very personal thing, so I can only give you my own personal opinion, and you're definitely out of my depth as far as any expertise goes, but I don't tend to look at it quite that way because fundamentally I don't believe that God intervenes in our lives. I think that, a core belief of mine is that He's given us everything we need to be happy, peaceful, and free. And that's the whole idea behind salvation, is that you choose to be good, charitable, and to respect your fellow man and to help your fellow man when he needs help. And I think you can explain all of this, just by bad choices that people have made. I mean, the greatest gift we have is our reason. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that man is like a seed planted upon the bosom of God, who draws at his need from unfailing fountains, and who can set possibilities to the limits of man. And I believe that's really true. And our reason allows us to discover these natural laws, which even if you don't believe in God, you have to recognize your reason will lead you to them even without the existence of God. And, we choose to try and violate them. And, that old cliche that Mother Nature, she always wins in the end. And this is what you're seeing. You're seeing, immutable natural laws being violated and the ugly consequences. And whether that comes from a all-powerful creator or whether that just comes from an impersonal universe, the bottom line is that, when you try to distribute resources through theft, you're going to have bad results. And that's what we're seeing all over the place. And really, I know I keep coming back to that, but at the very foundation of all of this, there is some kind of theft going on. And I don't know why it pops into my head, but I remember when I got my census form, which I can't really remember filling out, but it said that this is important you fill this out so that your community gets their fair share of federal funding. And I'm thinking, okay, they're going to build a railroad or something here in Florida, and why in the world do I get a fair share of some guy in Montana's money to build a railroad he'll never see or ever ride on? What's fair about that? I mean, that's just stealing, and that's just one tiny example. And you mentioned the banking thing. I mean, the banking system is built on theft. And at its very core. And you can't tweak it. You can't pass a new regulation. You can't even repeal old regulations. You've got to fundamentally change the system where someone can't commit fraud on an ongoing basis. And the fraud I'm talking about is, loaning money that you don't really have, and in a fiat currency system, that's really get your head going around in circles. But, until we address things like that, we won't see a solution by a leader or anybody else.
How do we right the ship then, Tom? Because you're making a lot of really great comments, and I'm just enjoying listening to some of your insight. But how do we right the ship if people are making fundamental bad decisions and bad choices that are hurting America and hurting the people in general? Who and how do we right this ship? Because I have a hard time believing that these bankers and politicians are just going to throw themselves willfully in jail. So how?
No, they never will, and they're not going to do anything. And you can protest all you want. You've got to educate. I mean, I think that the greatest thing you can do to strike a blow for liberty, number one, sounds drastic. Pull your kids out of school. I did it. I don't live next door to Mitt Romney, so it is a sacrifice. But the one thing I decided was, here's one kid that, for better or worse, is going to get my take on things, not this progressive mind-crushing machine. The first thing we have to do is educate people. Your show educates people. And, there's more and more, media outlets, shows, blogs, things popping up everywhere. You know, the great thing about this time we're living in is, yes, we're at this horrible end phase of this terrible system, but you've got the so-called green shoots are really, you know, the Judge Napolitano show, Freedom Watch, Green Wave, and they're starting to jump up all over the place. Mm-hmm. And the more we can educate people, at least get them to question something, you know, question what you've been taught. I think that's the beginning of running the ship, because all of this, requires our consent. There's nothing that the politicians can do to us unless we let them do it. Most people let them do the TSA. Everybody lets them do the monetary system. If they stop letting them, they couldn't do it anymore. You know, no army can fight an idea whose time has come, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think the most important thing is to educate people and to try and light people up, and if it spreads, it's effective, and only when we withdraw our consent will anything change.
Sure, and I think the biggest victory of Occupy Wall Street so far is just bringing these issues into the collective conscience and opening up a dialogue and discussion and different vantage points. I mean, that, again, is what America is all about. That's what we should be doing. But we need to figure out how we get to some kind of destination at the end of the day so that we know and can achieve some sort of success. We can right the ship, so to speak. We can take our country back. We can restore freedom and liberty. I mean, I think those are some principal ideals that everybody, can pretty much agree on, and is what we're trying to accomplish. It's very difficult to do because, again, we're faced with the constant, propaganda drip from the mainstream media, where they block, presidential candidates like Ron Paul, who's running for 2012. They don't give him, the same quality airtime that they'll give other candidates, such as Mitt Romney, who, in my personal opinion, I think is favored and will probably more than likely win the presidency in 2012. I think people are awaking to this, and, just like you said, Tom, there's more and more independent media emerging. We can argue this is in vogue now. I mean, this is mainstream. We were talking about this, several years ago when it wasn't the mainstream. A lot of us could see this coming. A lot of our viewers and listeners, we saw what was coming down the pike. We saw Occupy Wall Street coming down the pike. We saw all of this. And here we are kind of reaching this grand crescendo. Everybody wants to know, how does this end? Ultimately, how does this end peacefully? And how does this end in the betterment of society for all people? And, how do we reestablish things like a moral code in this country when it's clear we have a moral hazard and it's clear that we have disillusionment, and I would argue a lost generation of people that just don't trust the government? They don't trust our system. They don't trust our school systems. They don't trust the media. That is a very dangerous, slippery slope to be, entering. Here
I wish all that was true. I think they do trust the government. They do trust the media. I think that's the problem. I'm a long-term optimist. See, I don't see the so-called collapse as a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. I mean, what is really the worst that is going to happen in this so-called collapse? I mean, yes, we may have a lower standard of living if you base that on how many iPods you have and, how many vacations you take every year. But, even if the big social programs, well, not if, even when the big social programs collapse, what if there's no Social Security anymore? If the worst thing that happened is you had your parents come and check up with you or something like that, but you got your freedom back, is that such a big price to pay? If we ran out of money and had to bring all these troops home because we just couldn't even pay them anymore or pay to keep them housed over there, well, the first thing that happens is they stop dying. That's the best thing. And secondly, the program's over and resources stop getting diverted there. When the dollar fails, people will use something else. The market will always win. And then you think back in history, everything we learned in America, we learned through experience, and we may have to do it again. When they settled Plymouth, they had a communist system. And, even Bradford said that, it refuted that conceit of Plato's that people would be good and virtuous if they lived with communal property. So we learned that was bad. We had paper money, and we got massive inflation, and we learned that was bad. So, we've learned a lot of things, and we've forgotten what we've learned. I think that, it's not going to be hail and brimstone coming down from the earth. We'll all still be here when all this goes down, all this government. And we might have to work a little harder, but I think we're going to be a lot freer and ultimately a lot happier when it's over.
Well, I would say I would agree with those statements. And so what you're saying is that a collapse is necessary for the positive change to, I guess, rear itself. Everything that we so desperately need. We've talked about sometimes on this program, well, then why not accelerate the collapse? Why do we keep beating around the bush? Why don't we treat the hangover? Instead of taking another shot of tequila, why don't we send America into boot camp, so to speak, and get it cleaned up and change the things that aren't working in this country. I want to thank Tom for coming on the program. Tom, it's great having you on the show. Quickly, before we close out here, Tom, where can our viewers find more information about you?
TomMullen.net.
TomMullen.net. I'm Christopher Green. You've been listening to Greenwave Radio Live. As always, hard-hitting and in-your-face America. Stay tuned for our next program this coming Thursday. Talk to you all soon. I'm out.